Scottie Sumner.
Aaron Mobley.
Pleasure, my friend.
Hey, it's a pleasure to me, my man.
So, again, the reason why I want to do this and bring you on the journey is because I think it's important for people to hear your journey. You've been a huge influence, a spiritual influence, a pastoral influence throughout this community and throughout this region. And so, you've affected a lot of lives, and you've encountered and pastored multiple churches. So you've had an experience able to touch so many people in this community, not only in the churches, but also in the addiction community. And we'll talk about that a little bit as we go through this.
Sounds good.
But I want to touch on all of that, and it's such a pleasure and an honor to be here. You've been a mentor of mine for many, many years, and it's right here in this church, and by the divine providence of God, here we are today. But it was right here in this church, as you were pastoring close to 30 years ago, I'm assuming. That God really got back a hold of me in my life. And through your leadership, through your pastoral care, I think that God used you tremendously to be a part of molding me and who I am today. It was you that convinced me to go to Clear Creek Baptist Bible College. You remember that?
Yeah, I remember that. I remember it well.
You loaded me up in your minivan and said, let's go.
Yeah.
And so it was you that it was a huge influence on me going there and finishing my degree. It was actually you who really encouraged me to go on further with my master's and doctorate. It was also you that encouraged me in prison chaplaincy. So you've been a huge influence in my life, and really the directions and the pathways that I've taken, I believe that God has used you as an instrument to guide me in those directions. And you've been there through some of the most devastating times of my life. You've been a pastor, a friend, a mentor. And so it's such an honor to sit down with you today and do this interview so that others hopefully will find a blessing out of this also.
Man, I appreciate that. Thank you for all those kind words. And yes, I remember sitting here with you and bringing up, you and your family coming here, and just watching you grow in the Lord here, and watching God place that call upon your life, and being a part of that. I mean, it's an honor for me to be here. I mean, since the day you asked me here a few weeks ago about doing this, I told Patty, I said, let's be fun to hang out with Aaron, for a while.
Tell me where you grew up at and where you went to school and just your preteen age. What was that like?
Okay, preteen. Yeah, well, I was born into a rather large family. My dad worked with the United States Forest Service, and we moved around a little bit when I was first born. We lived in McQuarrie County, Kentucky. That's where my roots really are, with Sumners and Bryants from my mom's side of the family. But we didn't live there very long. We moved on into Whitley County at Williamsburg. And then when I was in the second grade, we moved from Williamsburg to Manchester in Clay County, Kentucky. And so I grew up in Clay County. So we first lived in Manchester. I went to Manchester Elementary School in second grade and third. And then when my dad, his office was over in a little community in Clay County called Peabody, population of less than 30. Our family, when we moved there, about double the population. So we moved over there in a rather isolated area. I mean, I could stand on my porch and not see a house anywhere. But I was so blessed with the family I grew up in. I see so much in Appalachia with poverty and just all the socioeconomic situation and drug infestation and what so many people have to deal with. I mean, I was just so isolated from all of that. My mom and dad set examples for me to live by. My mom, she's the first person that I ever really saw Jesus Christ in, even as a little boy, that I wanted what my mom had, and the main thing she had that I saw every day of her life was peace. And even as a little boy, I remember just appreciating my mom's peace as she worked around the house. She never worked a day outside of the house. She never drove a car 1 mile in her life. She passed away a couple of years ago at 96. And her life calling was to be a homemaker, a mother and grandmother, a great-grandmother, and she was as good as there was with that. My dad also, he was a little later in life becoming a Christian, but I think he was 54 when he did. But even before that, he took us to church, made sure we were there. And then when he committed to Christ, I saw a night and day difference in his life. So I had that great example. And I talk about the large family. I grew up with 4 sisters and 2 brothers. And I mean, each one of them just impacted my life so much. My oldest sister, Christine, I mean, she's a prayer warrior of the family. She's the first person to ever teach me to pray. I remember as a little boy, one of the first things I remember in life was Christine kneeling down with me and us saying the Lord's Prayer together, you know, before we go to bed at night. And remembering her. Then my next in line was my sister Irma. Irma was like the mother of the family. She made sure that we all took care of and all of that. And until the day my mom died, Irma made sure that mom and dad was always taken care of. So she was always the motherly one. My older brother David, he's 5 years older than me, and he's my hero. He's my big brother. I grew up wanting to be like David. You know, to me, David could do anything. My sister Joanne, she was the one next older than me in line. And of course, we fussed and fought a lot. She was closest to me, and we was close in size. So Joanne and I were always really close, and we're just also proud of what Joanne's accomplished in life with her career and overcoming breast cancer and things. She's just been a remarkable person and is. Then I came along, to my younger brother, Danny, we called him Boone, and he was my best friend growing up. So we fished together, we fought together and all of that. Then my youngest sister, Diana, she was just that sweet little beautiful sister that I would have fought hell over to take care of my little sister, you know. Uh-huh. And so growing up in that family, of course, that just impacted me. We were a close family. My wife says we were like the Waltons, you know. Of course, we grew up in isolation. But my mom always saw we were in church. Now, before my dad ever started going, he would take us to Sunday school, morning worship, take us, then after church, we'd come out, and our dad would be sitting to pick us up. And he'd take us home and say every Sunday night. Dad'd take us to church, we'd go to church, and then after church, he'd come pick us up. Same thing Wednesday night, same thing Friday night for youth. He made sure we were there. My mom was always there. And so when we moved over to the section of Clay County where my dad worked, the little larger area there, and it's just a community called Big Creek. Mm-hmm. And so we went to Big Creek Baptist Church. And that was just a beautiful experience to grow up in Big Creek Baptist Church. And this was back in late 60s, early 70s, mid 70s that I was growing up in that time. I was born in 1959, so late 60s, early 70s, but we had great friends in church, and it just, there was always enthusiasm in the church. There was people committing to Christ. The little building, the little block building was always just full, and there was exuberance, and it was exciting, Bible schools, and I just remember the adults there, and to me, they were older than Methuselah back then, so they might have been 30 years old, but I was a little boy, but they was probably in their 50s or 60s, but I still remember those men they knew my name as a little bitty boy coming to church, and they're, hey Scott, how you doing this morning? Looking good today. I like that shirt you got on and things, so I just, they were just so loving and all of that. And just from a child, from a boy growing up in church and listening to sermons and hearing the gospel early on and sitting in Sunday school and Bible schools, I knew who the Lord was from an early age. I saw other people commit to Christ. I saw friends commit to Christ, and I always wanted to. I was convicted within me, and I kept just putting it off and putting it off and putting it off. As far as I was ashamed, I was embarrassed, I didn't want to go up front. I was always a little timid type back then, and I didn't like getting in front of crowds. I didn't want to get in front of people and go in front of a church and go to an altar or, and that. I just didn't, that was just more than I wanted to bear, I believe. But then we had a revival where a young evangelist by the name of Don Pinson came, and he was single at that time. I was 14 years old. He was probably 19 or 20 maybe. And he was a fireball of a preacher. And we went out to we had a youth meeting on a Saturday, played softball, and Don and his girlfriend Vicky was with him. And we went back to church that night then. He was going to have church on Saturday night. And I was standing on the porch of the church, and his girlfriend Vicky, who's his wife now of 50 years or more, Vicky comes on the porch, and she knew me from the outing we just had at the park playing ball. And she said, Scottie, are you a Christian? That was the first time anybody ever just asked me point blank. And I kept telling myself inside of me, you know, I really do believe. I think I'll go to heaven maybe if I die. I hope I do, you know. But when she asked me that, there was no way I could say yes. It just, conviction fell all over me, and I mumbled a little bit, and I just got away from her as quick as I could. But man, that during that church service and that whole night, I was just convicted, because she asked me point blank, and I knew I am not a Christian. I have never been converted. You know, and that very next, I prayed all night. Lord, if you let me live in the morning, you know, I probably could have got saved, but I hadn't gone to church that morning. But with me, you know, so that morning on March the 27th, 1973, I was 14 years old. And at the end of Don Pinson preaching the revival service that morning, when the invitation went out at the end of the service, I was, man, my mouth was dry, my heart was beating. But I wanted the Lord. I wanted peace. And I stepped out and I came forward, and the preacher talked with me and shared with me and prayed with me. And I know in my heart, the moment I took a step, before I ever got to the preacher, the moment I took a step, there was a peace that came all over me. Mm-hmm. And when I left church that day, I didn't know much more than I knew when I went, but there was a peace that I experienced. And as Paul told the church at Philippi, it was truly a peace that passed all understanding. Mm-hmm. You know, and that's the first thing I remember about being saved, is just the peace that was with me. And that week of revival meetings, there was 20-something young people got saved that week. And the very next month in April, in the Redbird River here in Clay County, in April, in bitter cold, they took us down to the river bank and marched us in one at a time, and we got baptized. And 1 year later, in a revival, same church, my dad went that night. And he went forward and committed his life to Christ, and was saved that night, and I saw a difference in my dad that night.
What was it like, not just the church scene, but you can mention that too, because I see, you know, growing up in the church here, I think church is different now.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Much different.
Yeah.
But what was it like growing up in Appalachia, Kentucky, in the mountains here?
Yeah.
What was it like just generally, and then you can also add in there if you want to, what was the difference you see in churches?
Okay. Well, you know, of course, one thing, and we didn't know it at the time probably, but the poverty and just all of that, we didn't think about it as much back then. Everybody was all pretty much in the same boat, seemed like, you know, and that is still here today. But the poverty, I mentioned isolation. You know, everybody's not completely isolated. In Appalachia, we got our hollows, or what we call hollers, and there was a lot of, you know, there's little communities within themselves. But there are a lot of family and a lot of that. And for me growing up, you know, where we moved into this area, even though it's still Appalachia, it wasn't our home county, so we were the only Sumners at that time in Clay County. So I didn't have cousins and aunts and uncles and all of those growing up here. But just the, you know, just the isolation of things back then, and even as far as communication, you know, we had a TV, we had 2 channels, both was out of Knoxville, Tennessee, Channel 6 and Channel 10. That's 2 stations we got. You know, so there was not, you know, we watched the evening news and things of that nature. You know, a lot of just doing things outdoors. You know, if you grow up in Appalachia, back in that day, you're going to be an outdoorsman, or you're just going to be left behind. Yeah. You know, so you learn to fish, you learn to hunt, you learn to camp. And where I grew up, a lot of my buddies lived across the mountain on the other side. So I would walk up my side of the mountain, they'd go up their side of the mountain, and we'd meet in the middle up there in the mountain in desolation there. We'd take maybe a can of soup and some matches, and, you know, we'd build us a little fire and open our soup, and we'd eat, and we'd play in the mountains, and, you know, and stay gone all day. You know, we'd leave that morning in the mountains, come back in that night before dark, and, you know, Mom, Dad's never worried about us. Back in that day and time, there just seemed to be so much more peace and serenity, and not as much danger getting out. I mean, we was in the mountains, there's snakes, I don't know if there's bears back then or what, but I mean, you know, but it did seem like people weren't worried as much. There wasn't as much danger of, you know, nobody thought about somebody picking somebody up and running off with them, or somebody killing somebody out like that, you know. Kids got out and played out all day and came back in, and if we had bruises and scrapes, we put Band-Aids on them, washed them off, and went to bed, you know.
Is the isolation of your youth probably more healthy than the vast access to the globe that our kids have today? What's your opinion on that?
I really do think children are knowing too much too early, and they're not being able to even enjoy being a child and experiencing just the process of growing as a child. The children just know too much. Fear is, I didn't grow up afraid of much.
Yeah.
And children today, with all the knowledge they've got, with knowledge comes accountability, and a lot of and responsibility, and children are not, even though they may know some things now, I don't think they have the wherewithal to be
the maturity,
be mature with it.
Absolutely.
I think back then, as far as the difference with church, I think churches back then, to a large degree, knew who they were more than some churches do today. Again, that goes to knowledge maybe, but there's just so many ways of doing church. I mean, back then, if you were a Baptist church, you're pretty much all the same kind of Baptist church. Now, they all had little nuances, difference, but a Baptist church was a Baptist church. You can say Baptist church today, and you don't really know what it's going to look like, Yeah. And the same thing with most denominations, is I think churches knew who they were. And I think even doctrinally, people, being that, they understood more doctrinally, I think, than a lot of people do today. I think because, I've worked with a lot of different churches over the last several years. And I tell you, a lot of churches are just struggling with who are we now? I mean, are we the other traditional church from 1975, or how do we implement being a church in 2025 today now, and what kind of transitions, what kind of changes? Back then we weren't talking about changing anything with church. We had Sunday school, we had morning worship, we had evening worship, we had church training and Sunday school, and those were the basics. We needed to do those basics, and now it's just like we don't hardly know what to do in some ways of reaching people and just being who we're supposed to be, it seems to me like.
Now we talked about your birth family. Tell me a little bit about your married family.
Okay, let me back up just a hair and lead into that rather quickly because I became a Christian when I was 14. I know I got saved then, but there was no discipleship. I'm not putting that on the church. It is what it is. I actually thought when I got saved that I'd beat the devil. I don't have to deal with him again probably. I knew I would, but I didn't think I'm in now. And then I went to high school. I was a pretty good boy the rest of my 8th grade year until I went to high school, and I'd never seen a drug. I'd heard very little bad language. At school you'd hear and you'd sneak or something, but I was just, again, that's a good thing about isolation maybe. But then I went to high, and then when my junior year is when that's when I started sowing my wild oats. I got in more trouble my junior year in school, at home, and everywhere than I ever had in my life. I kicked out of school at one time for a few days. And it was that year that I was also introduced to alcohol. Now, I knew about alcohol. I'd seen alcohol. I'd seen people drink alcohol and that, but I'd never drunk any alcohol. But then I started getting more into the party scene with it and with marijuana. And by the time I was a senior, I wasn't just being involved in the parties, I was leading the parties. And so, I mean, I was living up the party life when I was graduated from high school. And I went to work for a road construction when I first got out of high school in 1977, the summer of '77. Worked road construction a couple of years, then I went to work for a coal company. Shamrock Coal Company was the name of that company. And it was at that time that I met my wife-to-be. Now, I was, at that time, 19. She was actually 16. And we started dating. And we dated for a year and got married. So I was 20 and she was 17 when we got married. Her mother had to sign. I joke with people, yes, she was 17 and I was 20, but no, she wasn't my cousin. So we got married on August the 11th, 1979. So we've been married for 46 years now. I was 20, she's 17. 10 months after we got married, we had our first child. Now, you talk about being set up for failure. I'm sure nobody would give us a year, probably, with me living like I was living. Now, my wife was pretty much a poly purebred. We weren't going to church or even thinking about God. I don't know that her and I ever had a conversation about God when we got married. We just fell in love. We fell in lust, and we got married. We had a baby 10 months later. I'm working for a coal company. We're living in a mobile home. You know, we're struggling. We're struggling because now she was against my party, and I thought we'd just continue to go to parties. Now, when we go to parties, even dating, she wouldn't get drunk, she wouldn't do, but she'd laugh and cut up, we'd dance, we'd do things, but I would get too bad. I'd go too far with every bit of it. And then we got married, and and then especially after we had our first child, it was a daughter, Tia is her name, and so we really started struggling as a couple and as a young family. We weren't in church, but the Lord started setting me back up. He started putting people in my life. A very good friend of mine, he's a family court judge here now, Clint Harris. Clint and I were together every day. I think every date my wife and I went on, he was with us. You know, he's my best man in our little small wedding we did. But his mom and dad, Jack and Verta Harris, just took Patty and me under their wing. They knew that we weren't living right or living for the Lord. And they were church people. They loved God, and they just started loving us. And Clint and I got a church basketball team together. So you had to go to church once a week to play basketball. So I had to go to church once a week to play basketball. So I went to Jack and Verta's church, and Jack and Verta just loved us to death in that church. They got the whole church to loving us to death. It's a New Home Baptist Church here in Clay County. And that church just loved us to death. And they loved Tia to death. We called her the church toy. We'd go to church, they'd just pass her around. Everybody would hold her for a few minutes, you know. And then at work, there was a man named William. And now that was one of the most godly men I've ever met in my life, even today. And he and I operated a drill, and so we would work together quite a bit. And so the Lord put me hanging out with him. And then he also had me going to church now, so I'm listening to preaching because I have to be there. I'm hanging out with William because I have to work beside him. But both of them start pouring right back into me. And then I start thinking about my mother. And I start thinking about my little baby girl. And I said, my mother raised me better than I'm raising my little baby girl. I could not stand the thoughts of my little baby girl growing up not knowing God. And then I'm going to church. I'm listening to preaching on Sunday. William that I'm working with, he's treating me just right. He's not preachy. He's not overbearing. He's just living it, you know. And then if I'm asking him a question, he's just talking to me in a very good way. And so it was through that I began to start reading the Bible again. But all of a sudden, every time I would read, it was just like Jesus started becoming so real to me. Now, I'm already saved. I know I'm saved. But, man, I've been living like the devil for a few years now. But all this conviction and and then me thinking about, man, this is real. Someday this world's coming to an end. You know, I mean, what kind of person am I? And I'm raising my daughter. Now another my wife's pregnant again. And all of this is coming home to me. And then my wife and I began to start talking about our relationship with God. And it was on the first Sunday in January, New Year of probably our second year of marriage. We're in church because we have to be in church to play ball that week. And I don't know what the message was, but I remember standing there under conviction. And I remember when the invitation went out, I broke. And I went forward, and as soon as I took a step, my wife took a step with me. We took the baby up front with us, and I rededicated my life. And it was almost like a salvation experience, but it wasn't. It was just a total commitment. And I really fought with this within me, because if I was going to fully commit, it was going to be fully commit. I wasn't just going to try to get in church or just straighten my life to get my relationship with my family better. If I was going to commit to God, it was going to be all or nothing. You know, and that Sunday morning, the ball team was there. My good friend Clint was there, and I thought, they may think, well, they may not like me no more after this, because the things we were doing, we was playing in church league. We were not church people playing, I tell you that right now. And but man, those guys come up and hugged me, said they was proud of me. Clint come around, and his tears streaming down, and he hugged me, said, I'm proud of you. Call me Sock, proud of you, Sock. You know, and so that was encouraging. And man, from that moment, I just started seeking the Lord. From that moment, I'd go to work, I'd come home, first thing I'd do is clean up, eat supper, go to my room, start reading. I would read till I'd go to sleep at night, and get up the next morning, go to work, come back, that same thing. And I just started taking the word for what he said. You know, I mean, all of a sudden I started convicted about my neighbors. I started going out and knocking on doors, telling people, listen, I don't stand before God and have to give an account because I didn't go share the Lord with somebody that lives, that I can throw a rock and hit their house. So I just started going out and visiting people before I go, and then I got a night shift job. During the day, I'd go visit. I'd read, study, pray, go visit, then go to work at night. You know, and I had no idea of being a preacher. I never dreamed about being a preacher. It never crossed my mind. But, you know, it was just, the Lord put people back into my life that just loved me back to Him. They didn't condemn me. Most of them knew how I was living. They just loved me for who I was. And it was that the Lord used to convict me and bring me back to Him.
Tell me about your children, a little bit about your wife. We've been introduced already to Patty, but just tell me a little bit about your family.
So my wife, she's truly, the moment that the first night we got together, I fell in love with her then, and I really did. I didn't look at another woman since, you know, and so we started dating, and Patty is a very gifted person. She's a very tenacious person. She's very passionate. Whatever she does, she's going to be passionate about it. I don't care if it's planting a flower. She's going to go at it with everything in her, planting that flower, you know. She reads and studies Scripture more than I do. She don't miss a day that she won't spend at least an hour. Now, when I say she don't miss a day, yes, every now and then a day will happen. But for the most part, if she misses a day, for the most part, she'll catch up on that. And when she reads, she shares with me. You know, her and I are so different in so many ways. She's so much more outgoing and so much more bold than me. I mean, if Patty meets, if we go to Walmart, within 5 minutes, if she meets somebody, she'll know if they've been saved or not. She's going to know whether they go to church or not. You know, now me, it takes me a while to build a relationship before I get to that point, but we can leave Walmart and she's already met 2 or 3 people and she can tell you if they're saved or not, whether they go to church or not, you know. And that's just her personality. She's outgoing. She speaks her mind. She loves the Lord, and she's really got a heart for hurting people. And you know, and the Lord has shown us in ministry, He's just brought a lot of hurting people into our lives. And I don't care how hurt the person is, when they're brought to Patty, she gets energy in ministering to them, in counseling with them, in praying for them, and praying with them. And she's been at my side ever since. You know, now the first couple of years was tough, but she looked me straight in the eye and left with my daughter one day and said, "I'm not going to let you raise my daughter living like you're living." And she left, and then she came back late that night. And so she's just that kind of a person. My oldest daughter, Tia, loves the Lord. She's got 3 beautiful children. So I've got 3 grandchildren with her, and I'm just so thankful for her walk with Christ. Tia really has a heart for people. My middle daughter's Kendra. Kendra is very successful. I mean, she's a hard worker. She's worked her way up in the medical profession and just has a great work ethic. And back in May of this year, she adopted 2 little girls, and they're beautiful. They're precious. They look about like our family. They fit right in, you know. And so she's just the best little mother ever was to those girls, and takes them to church and has devotion with them every night. And then my youngest daughter, Whitney, Whit has 3 children, 2 boys, and she that are both teenagers, and she has a little 2-year-old girl now. And Whit's a pretty tenacious and passionate person. Whatever Whitney goes about, she goes about it with everything in her. Whitney will stand up for the weak. And so the Lord has just blessed me with 3 beautiful daughters, a wonderful wife. I also have, so I've got 8 grandchildren now and 2 great-grandchildren. Tia's daughter, Sydney, has a little girl and a little boy now. So we got 2 great-grandchildren.
Touch a little bit on your experience at Clear Creek, because that's mine and both our alma maters.
Yeah. Well, you know,
you're the one that actually guided me to Clear Creek, and I have nothing bad to say about them. But I want you to share some great experiences you had at Clear Creek.
You know,
and what it meant to you, how it grew you.
Well, one thing, the step of faith. You know, I was working for a coal company. We owned our own house. We just bought it. We just bought the house, and 3 months later, I surrendered to preach. 3 months after that, we put the house up for sale. You know, and that was back in 1980. And I wrote for sale on a house for us to go to Clear Creek. 2 weeks later, the house sold. And so, but the taking a step of faith, because I'd never done anything like that. How's the Lord? Ronald Bradshaw, it's one thing he shared with me. I said, "Lord, how did you live? How did you make it?" He said, "If God calls you, He will provide. But how did you make it? If God calls you, He'll provide. You got to take a step of faith. And then when I went to Clear Creek, Tommy Holtzclaw was the admissions professor, and he said about the same thing. And he said it's sort of like Abraham. God called him, was going to take him to a place, and I'll show it to you when you get there. And he said that's sort of what you've got to do if God's calling you to do this. And so I didn't have enough sense but to take that step of faith, and the Lord blessed us. I mean, I never had to get out and get even a job to provide. I mean, I just go preach. Now, Patty got a job with the Dean of Students at Clear Creek, and she served in the Dean of Students office, and she about run that office. Every student at Clear Creek knew Patty Sumner. I mean, because every student went through that Dean of Students office, you know, so she got familiar with all of them. And just watching the Lord provide for us. The Lord began to show me early on that if you'll do what I tell you to do, if you'll go where I tell you to go, I will take care of you. And there was a lot of stories like that all through Clear Creek then, that we would get right to where we think we can't make it, but God always came through. Always. So the faith, the taking a step of faith and going there. So that was it. But then just the people I met too. I mean, some of the best friends I've ever had in my life that's been lifelong friends. And I know that's your experience too. I mean, I've got friends today that go all the way back to Clear Creek, and I mean, they've stuck with me closer than a brother, just the friends. And I tell you, I love my professors. I mean, I sat under some men that were godly men, and that taught the Word. And I mean, they just taught me so much. So just the experience of the faith, the friendships that we made there, and then just sitting under some men that forgot more than I'll ever know about the Bible, and being able to communicate it. And the way the professors encouraged me, Aaron, when I went to Clear Creek, I had never heard of a seminary. I hadn't. Didn't know what a seminary was. I didn't know what it was. I mean, I'm a little podunk boy off of isolation in Clay County, growing up in isolation, then called to preach, and going to a Bible college now. And then they start talking to me. The professors start encouraging me. You ought to think about going to seminary, and I began to study what is a seminary, and that. So I guess the encouragement to keep learning and to keep growing and to give your very best. Don't sell God short. He gave His best when He gave Jesus. We ought to give our best back to Him. And so that was really my mindset then. By the time I became a senior at Clear Creek, I knew that I was supposed to go on to seminary after that then. So, I mean, Clear Creek was special and still is to me today from what I had back then.
Agreed. So tell me a little bit about Southwestern Theological Seminary. And
that was just a great experience too. Just again, the faith, about like with Clear Creek, the Lord providing all along the way. Sitting under some rich teaching. Now, Clear Creek prepared me, especially in Bible. I'm not bragging, but there wasn't very many people at Southwestern that was going to outshine me in Bible classes. Clear Creek had prepared me for that. But then when it came to some of the other stuff, I fell in love with church history at Southwestern. I sat under some wonderful Leon Macbeth, Doyle Young. Macbeth's the books he wrote, the histories he wrote, was the ones that most Southern Baptist seminaries use as their textbooks. And to sit under him the history just came alive to me there. And I fell in love with all history, but especially church history with that. And but one of the great things blessings of being in seminary and going to Fort Worth was living away from home. I'm an Appalachian boy. Grew up in Clay County, went to college at Clear Creek, still in the mountains. It was when we went to Fort Worth that we had to stand on our own 2 feet then, and that was away from Mommy and Daddy and from the old bluegrass state and from my turf. I'm not on my turf no more, so there was a lot of growing up to do in that. But just living away from home.
But you do a little bit of Greek and Hebrew.
We do a little bit of Greek and Hebrew, yeah. Now, when I graduated Clear Creek, I had taken more Greek than any student at Clear Creek at that time. Now, people like you and others come along probably surpassed me on that, but I the Greek and Hebrew I had there, did do that. And while I was there, I went to pastor a little church in Oklahoma, Leon Baptist Church, about a 2-hour drive. It's a little ranch church. They're mostly peanut farmers. Just a good group of salt of the earth people. So I pastored that church a couple of years and just had a great time with them. Just going up there, driving up every weekend. That little parsonage beside the church, so we'd go up, and me and Patty and the girls go up. That gets away from the city, gets away from school, so I compartmentalized. During the week, I was all seminary. I concentrated on that. When I got out of school Friday, I'd turn my mind to the church and concentrate on the church then, you know. And did that for a couple of years, and then resigned that to finish up my last semester at Southwestern. But it was just, I'm so thankful to have that opportunity.
So at Southwestern, you earned what degree?
Is a Master of Divinity.
Master of Divinity.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you've gone pretty far in theological education. My question to you is, looking back on it now, I know we have great experiences, and especially Clear Creek because it's so much more intimate. Mm-hmm. Seminary is a little bit different.
Yeah.
I don't know if your experience is the same as mine.
Yeah.
A little bit different.
Oh, yeah.
It's not as intimate,
Right.
and not as spiritual in my opinion.
Right, yeah.
But it's still good.
Yeah.
But in your opinion, looking back on your education, would you say it was beneficial in your ministry or not beneficial?
It was extremely beneficial. A lot of the ministry I've done, I wouldn't have done without it. And of course, I've been a prison chaplain. Mm-hmm. And to be a chaplain with Federal Bureau of Prisons, you have to have a Master of Divinity. Mm-hmm. So, if I didn't have that, I wouldn't even been I couldn't even applied for some ministry positions. So very advantageous as far as just broadening your base and foundation of being able to do various ministry here or there. That just broadens the scope of what you're able to do then, but just the things I learned. Listen, without that, there's no way I would have known Scripture like I know Scripture if I hadn't gone to Clear Creek. There's no way I would have known what I've known as far as just Scripture, church history, and all of that if I hadn't gone to the schools I'd gone to, and with the teaching and just being around other people. I had a professor say one time, it's Dr. Earl Clark at Clear Creek. He said, when I went to college, I thought I had all the answers. He said, but it didn't take me long at being at college. I just realized I hadn't heard all the questions. And I think that was me, I certainly hadn't heard all the questions when I went to Clear Creek and Southwestern, and I heard a lot more questions that I didn't have the answer to,
That's funny. So tell me a little bit about, you mentioned being a prison chaplain at the Federal Bureau of Prisons.
Yeah.
Share with me briefly a little bit about prison chaplaincy.
Yeah. I would have never dreamed of being a prison chaplain. I'd never been inside of a prison to preach, teach, or I was never incarcerated in a prison. So, and that's just out of my world. That's nothing that I would ever identify with as far as that. I graduated Clear Creek, and we came back to Clay County then, and I was pastoring a little church, Zion Baptist Church, and Ronald Bradshaw steps up again. The one, my first mentor that got me to Clear Creek, well, he's pastoring Littleton Baptist Church here in Clay County then. And they just bring a federal prison to Manchester. I think it was in 1993, was the, 92 or 93, was the 92 or 93. Well, he becomes a volunteer at the prison. And I bump into him one day, and he says, Scottie, it is the richest ministry I've ever been a part of. He says, listen, I love it. He said, you would love it. He said, I can get you hooked up with a chaplain if you'd like to be a volunteer. And the prison had been about a year or so at that time. I said, yeah, I'd love to try it, And after he talked about it, I thought, well, yeah, I'd love to try it. I'll always not do it if I don't like it. And so the chaplain calls me, and he's looking for volunteers in, And so I go in and preach one Sunday morning. And I'll never forget walking in and closing those doors behind me. And I think, what am I doing here? Can I get out? And going in, and then the chapel. There's probably 200 men there that morning, and the chapel was full. And I stand up, and my knees are knocking, but I do the best I know how, and I preach a message. And when I get done, there's a line from me all the way to the back of the chapel of men waiting for me to pray for them one by one. Every one of them just wanted me to pray with them. And so they come around, they're telling me their situation, and I'm praying with them. They're telling me their court case, I'm praying with them. They're telling me their family problem, I'm praying with them, And just doing that, when I leave, I thought, man, that was rich. That was they were hungry. Now, I mean, the congregation was not my normal congregation. You know, I mean, it wasn't my color. It wasn't, they didn't look like me or anything like that, you know. But man, those men come up, and me being white, and most of them being black, they come up and they hug me, they embrace me, the preacher prayed for me, pastor prayed for me, you know, and that it was just such a positive experience. So I started volunteering at Manchester here. Anthony Oakley was the chaplain. And he started using me all the time. I filled in for him every time he was gone. I preached. I went out and led Master Life discipleship training courses. I was out there all the time, and I just fell in love with it. And I thought, you know, I'd like to be a prison chaplain. And so I went through the process of the application. And it was different then than it is today. So I went through the process, and at that time, I'm living close enough to the Manchester Federal Correctional Institute that when the lights go on at night, I can look up and see the glow of the lights. I'm volunteering out there. They need a chaplain. They've got 2 chaplains at the time. They've got the opening for 3. 1 left. They need a chaplain. So I apply, and I'm thinking I'm going to be a chaplain here at Manchester now if I can get on. My last interview was in D.C. At that time, they flew me to D.C. for my interviews. And I interviewed, and they called me a few days later, said, "You're on the board." And they asked me a question in the interview: "Are you willing to be mobile?" Mobile. I said, "Yeah, I'll be mobile. I've moved around a lot in my life." I thought, yeah, but surely Manchester needs a prison. I could throw a rock and hit that prison. The government's going to do the right thing. They're going to be smart, you know. They're going to be efficient. I get a call about a month later. We have a position for you. I said, "Yeah, where?" 3 Rivers, Texas. I just moved from Texas from Southwestern a year earlier with my family. I thought, 3 Rivers, Texas. And I remember telling them in the interview that I would be mobile. And I said, "Well, give me a day to think about this." And she said, "Okay." I called Anthony Oakley, the chaplain. He said, "I wouldn't go to 3 Rivers, Texas." He said, "But if I was just starting out to get in," he said, "now you could work a year, you maybe could get transferred." Or okay, and I talked to Roland Bradshaw about it, and he prayed with me. Patty and I prayed about it. And so I decided to take it. I needed to get in. I'd spent 8 years going through school. I needed to support my family now too. And so I took the position, and what I was going to do is I'd go down. So I drove down there, and I would fly in. I'd get my days off together pretty much, you know. Like I'd get a 3-day weekend about once a month. I'd take a day with it. And I'd fly in once a month and spend with my family, and I'd fly back to 3 Rivers, Texas, and work for a month, and I'd fly in for a weekend. So I was going to scope out the place, try to find us a place, and I was going to move the family back to Texas, or maybe get the government to move me back to Manchester where I was already living and they needed somebody, you know. And it was so, but I loved it. I fell in love with the ministry down there. Aaron, and you're from a prison ministry background too. You know what I'm talking about. Going in and preaching. I remember the first sermon I preached down there at 3 Rivers, Texas. Oh, it was full. I mean, they embraced me. They embraced my accent. They embraced everything about me. And they, you know, and then at the camp, there's the 2 prisons, the FCI and the camp, and just a rapport, and to see God move in men's lives. I saw Him put marriages back together, and just saw men turn their life over to Him and be changed, radically changed, and I loved it. But I was down there for almost a year, and Patty was in a car wreck. I put in for a transfer. I'm like emergency transfer or whatever. And they was piddling around about it. And that's when Horse Creek Baptist Church calls and asked if I'd be interested to be their pastor. So when Horse Creek called, and I just knew this was the place to come then. So I got out of the prison ministry at that point. But when I got out, I couldn't leave it still. In my mind, I still missed it. I'd never missed a ministry. Like every time I moved on, I love the people, but I didn't miss it. You know, I just missed it. And I just missed it. So I just bounced in and out of the prison ministry for 30 years. I'd go in and do prison ministry for a few years and sort of get burnt out with it somewhat, and I'd get out. Get back in, get back out, get back in and get out. And pastor a church for a while, then go back to the prison ministry. And, you know, there's a couple of occasions where the prison called me and said, you know, here at Manchester, would you consider coming and straightening out this department? said, we're just in a mess right now, and we really liked you when you was here. Could you come? And I'd go back, you know. So I was at Three Rivers, Texas. Then I was at Manchester FCI 2 different times here in Clay County. And I finished up then in Lexington at the Federal Medical Center in Lexington. And right now, if you look at my Facebook account, a good portion of my friends on there are former inmates. That some of them come. We got a close friend of ours that was in. He was in for probably close to 20 years. Lives in New York, and he'll fly down once a year and spend a weekend with Patty and me, and we just spend a weekend talking and praying and reading and sharing and having fun, and so we got a lot that we still keep up with, and they keep up with us. And if I need prayer, sometimes I'll hit some of those men. And Lexington also had a women's facility, a camp, so we got to know some ladies in that. Patty was with me every step of the way in my ministry. She went in and sung. She went in and spoke. She always would go in with me with services and help out with services. So it was one of those ministries that Patty and me both just really fit together in doing too.
Yeah. So with those people who don't know anything about prison ministry, and I'm not talking about at a jail, because a jail's a little bit different.
Right, it is different.
Preaching in jail a little bit, but being behind a fence.
Yeah.
Sort of, well, let me ask you this. Is church different inside the fence and inside a church house?
One phone call we get from men that's gotten out, that was under our ministry there and that we talked to. I don't know how many times I've had a man that's gotten out call and say, "Chap, you told me right. You told us when we got out we're not going to have church out here like we had it in prison. Chap, I'm struggling to find a church. I want a church like I had in prison." Prison church is definitely different. Now, there may be some people don't like it, I don't know. But I love the prison church. I loved it in the fact that your congregation, everybody was on the same playing field. You could stand there and preach, and here would be a gangbanger from Chicago, and here would be a former district judge sitting in the same clothes, on the same pew, in the same boat, both needing the same Savior. And I don't know how many times I would see the gangbanger and the judge at one time or another maybe embrace with tears streaming down both cheeks and hug each other, and see two brothers that on the outside they would have never had that. That would have never happened. But inside the prison, you would see that kind of oneness. The most unified churches I've ever pastored were prison churches.
Yeah.
But men are so hungry. You know, when you preach, it's like making a meal. And you know, as a preacher, a pastor, you put the meal together and you bring it to the people that's coming to eat. But if they've already eat or they're not hungry, you've made this big meal, and you know you've shared that meal, but nobody really ate much. You know, nobody was even hungry. They ate before they came. But when you go into the prison and you provide that meal for those inmates, they're hungry. They're coming hungry, and they're coming to eat. And I'll tell you something else I liked about it, is that, you know, out here, it's so easy. I mean, we can say our little churchy words, and we can just say our little things, and we can get the amens, and we can do this and that. But when I would preach in prison, more times than not, there was going to be some from the Nation of Islam come just to listen to the chaplain preach. What's the word? I've had men from the Nation of Islam say, "I just want to come, chaplain, and hear the word you got." You know, there'd be Native Americans that would be there. There'd be some Rastafarians that would be there. Some Santerias would show up at it, you know. More Science Temple of America. There'd always be 2 or 3 of them, sometimes more than that. And a lot of those guys would sit right up front. But no, now I'm going to preaching now. I can't use my little old Baptist terminology here. And I've got guys coming that their whole worldview, their whole everything, but they're actually wanting to hear, though. They're coming to hear, you know. And so I love that aspect that, man, God, I've got to depend upon you right here. Listen, Lord, I mean, it's got to be from you. And I know you've got a message for these guys. It's not just mine, the men that think like me, that believe like me, that are, you know, that are Christian like me. We've got others coming, you know. And I don't know, there's a dynamic there that, you know, you can go into the prison and you can preach to the world.
Yeah.
Because you've got them from all over the world that's there. You know, and so when they go out, you're sending people out that have gotten saved under your ministry there and that you disciple there. You're sending them out now all over the world to be evangelists, to be missionaries, to be whatever, wherever, everywhere. I really like that dynamic of the prison church. And of course, it's much more exuberant. You know, my experience in the prison church is I mean, and that's something Patty would always mention, especially in the men's prison, to hear all those men voices and them sing it out. And I mean, my experience was that when we had, I don't care if it was a hymn, I don't care if it was what it was, the men sung, and you heard those men sing it out. There was just, you know, there was just active participation on every level of that, preaching in the prison, and I love that.
One thing I noticed in prison chaplaincy was, and I think it's what it made it so special, is here, I'm not picking on Horse Creek because I love these people here. I'm just saying in church, outside of prison, it's easy come, easy go.
Yeah.
To come to church.
Yeah.
There's no risk.
Yeah.
You know, it's what we do. It's sometimes it's a social thing too.
Yeah.
In prison, sometimes it's dangerous to go to church.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Because, and I don't know if it was that way at your prisons, but at my prisons, if you went to church, a lot of the people thought that you were a child molester.
Yeah.
And you were going there to hide. So it was sort of dangerous, even though most of them weren't.
Yeah.
It was dangerous to go to church. And not only that, but when they were there, the word I like to use is they were desperate.
Yeah, that's a good word.
There was a desperation of the congregation. You know, you used the word hungry. I used it, they're that too, but I believe they were desperate.
Yeah, that's good.
They're desperate for peace.
Yeah.
Because they don't, you know, I don't care how safe a prison is, there's no peace.
Right.
In prison. They were desperate for peace. They were desperate for relief.
Yeah.
For clarity, for the word.
Yeah.
Their relationship and protection.
Yeah. Yeah.
So with that dynamic, man, it made it special.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, I'm glad you mentioned that, because something that I correct people on, it gets under my skin just a little bit, is when you hear people, when you say, oh, you're a prison chaplain. Well, you got a captive audience there, didn't you? It comes across as like, well, they had to be there, so you had this captive audience. No. Then the point you made is perfect, too, is that sometimes going to church, there's a risk you're taking in coming, because you may be going back to a cellie, someone your cellmate, that may try to thump your head because you went to church or make fun of you for going to church. Or they may be from a different religion, and they're going to gang up on you. If they don't beat you up, they're just going to terrorize you with questions and derogatory remarks and things like that. Yeah. So they're going right back. You know, here you go home, you're going back home to your home. Here they're going back to maybe the home of Muslims, the home of Santerias, the home of whatever. That's different from their thing. So no, they're not just a captive audience.
Yeah. That's right. I think that's why it made it special.
Yeah.
Because they sacrificed something to go, to be honest.
Right.
They were sacrificing in some way to go.
Yeah.
So let's talk about spiritual disciplines real quick. How do you pursue holiness and communion with God in your daily life? How do you do it personally?
Yeah. When I went to Clear Creek, they had a bunch of these one-year Bibles that takes... You've got an Old Testament passage, a New Testament passage, a Psalm, and a proverb. And you go through that, and by the end of the year, you've gone through the Bible. So that's a daily reading every time. I think I got my little one-year Bible that when I was down at Clear Creek, probably 86. That has been the voice of God, that Bible, more than any book. Because that's been my devotional Bible. When I get up in the morning, that's the book I go to. I go to my daily reading, and then, Lord, what are you saying to me today? Or what, you know, and I go through. That's pretty much a constant with me. Now, I've got days I miss. And there's been some years I've been so faithful to it, I didn't hardly miss a day. And by the end of the year, I was right with it. But then there are times you miss, and there are times you miss. You feel guilty about it. You try to just read and catch up, but the catching up, you're just reading it to catch up, to check the box, and you're not getting much out of it. You're just catching up, you know. But that one-year Bible, and me just using that, you know, and that's been going on for 40 years now. You know, it is, so having that, just that time with me in the Word and doing it in a systematic, regular fashion. I'm not just going trying to find something here or there. Lord, what is it today? It seems like every day it's right there what I need, almost every day through that. So that, and then along with my wife, just the accountability that we have with each other and just sharing and talking Scripture and that. But one of the things that's helped me and been, as far as with discipline and accountability, I mentioned Don Pinson that was preached that revival when he was probably 19 or 20 years old in 1973. When I came to Horse Creek Baptist Church in 1996, I hadn't seen Don Pinson since 1973. Didn't even know if he's still alive, where he lived or nothing. I still remembered him, remembered his name, remembered Vicky. I didn't know they ever got married or nothing. When that revival was over, that was the end of Don Pinson with me. I started pastoring Horse Creek Baptist Church in 96. After being here 2 or 3 months, there was a knock on our door. Patty answered the door, and it was a man selling business cards and office supplies and stuff like that, door-to-door salesman. Well, Patty hollered at me, and I came to the door. You know who that salesman was? It was Don Pinson. I said, "You don't know me. You are Don Pinson." I said, "Yeah, I'm Don Pinson." I said, "You preached the revival I was saved in 1973 at Big Creek Baptist Church." Well, he married Vicky. They had 2 children now. They're living in Manchester now. He's serving in another church now, but he's doing this business to help provide for his family. Well, we get to talking and just get to sharing. And from that day on, he really became an accountability partner with me. When I was at Horse Creek, Don and I would meet once a week for probably at least 2 hours. We would meet, and we didn't talk sports. We didn't talk weather. We talked Scripture. We talked personal lives. I mean, now, I've moved around a lot since that, and there have been times we've done that over the phone, and there's been times we've not done it all for seasons. But when I came back to Clay County 10 years ago, he and I picked right back up. I'd been gone for a few years, so we didn't meet during that time. But I'm saying having an accountability partner, and Don would be my accountability partner. He and I could meet in the morning, and we could pick right back up and have the richest 2-hour session. And we'll ask serious questions to each other. What have you been reading? What have you been watching? What are you listening to? You know, and I mean, we talk serious about how we're getting along with our wives and what's going on with our children. There's no holding back. I've poured out of myself. He knows the inside of me more than anybody, you know, and it's just, so having that accountability partner has really, that 1-year Bible, and then that accountability partner that we've met and challenged each other and hold each other accountable has probably been the 2 most important things in my life, along with just, you know, my wife. Now, she's going to stay on top of things.
She ain't afraid to tell you.
She's not afraid to tell me. That's exactly right, yeah.
So you mentioned Patty.
Uh-huh.
Another real quick question is, how does Patty feel about you serving as pastor? How is her general attitude about it? You know, because as being a former pastor, it's a roller coaster.
Yeah.
So how does Patty feel about that, and how do your children, do your children have a positive or a negative view of pastoral ministry?
Yeah.
Because of what they've experienced, not because of the way they feel about it, but just from their experiences.
Yeah. Well, first of all, with Patty, and remind me about the second one. So that was a good question. I'll answer them. Patty, she finds being a pastor's wife in a church more challenging than any other ministry I've ever done. I think Patty, you know, because Patty's not one just to sit back and smile and just be that quiet supporter. Patty wants to get her hands dirty. She wants to get into ministry, you know, and she wants to get into, and Patty's hard. I mean, she's into jail and prison ministry and homeless shelter ministry and drug addiction ministry a lot. I mean, she's done so much of that and she wants to get in and reach those people and bring them to church with her and that. And I don't know whether if this is, sometimes I think Patty, I tell you, Patty, that's more in your mind than it really is with the people, but I think sometimes Patty just feels like I'm not the typical pastor's wife. I don't know whether she struggles sometimes, I think, just knowing that this is really the best fit for me and can I really fit? You know, and I'm honest with churches. I told Horse Creek before I came back this time that, you know, Patty's struggling some now. Patty's wondering, how am I going to fit in? Where's my place going to be? And I said, now, y'all just give Patty some time. Patty's going to take some time checking things out and thinking through things and to find her place here. And so Patty loves the prison ministry. Well, we did a rescue mission for 10 years. Patty, that was bread and butter for her, you know. I mean, those kind of things. Now, you come back into the church ministry, you know, it's more challenging. But now she's totally supportive. I mean, she's supportive, and she's wanting to get in, and she's finding her place, and that. With my daughters, I was taught at Clear Creek that ministry's hard on your family. Mm-hmm. You know, you can lose your family fast in ministry. And most of my graduates, I can say most. I don't think it's stretching to say most of my graduating class at Clear Creek lost their families in ministry. Yeah. Some of my closest friends in Clear Creek lost their families in ministry. Yeah. So, I mean, I knew that, and I took that to heart, and I believe that. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I always tried to make sure that I wasn't leaving my family out. I was this. I always knew that, and I honestly, within myself, thought I was always doing a pretty good job with that, as good as could be done. Mm-hmm. And I think I did a pretty good job. Yeah. With that being said, though, I look back, and it was a lot harder on my daughters than I realized it was even at the time. You know, just even when I was here at Horse Creek before, I mean, Horse Creek is a pretty good-sized church. Your daddy's the preacher of the big church, and you know, you're out there a lot. You're speaking in schools. You're speaking on the radio. You're leading prayer at ball games. You go into the school. There's Brother Scottie, Pastor Scottie. You know, and with children growing up, it was harder on my girls than I thought it even was. And I look back, and I can even look back and see, you know, because as a pastor, you're always encouraging others, and sometimes you go home, you're just beat from a day of ministry. And don't get me wrong, my girls are back in church now. I can see the Lord working in my girls' lives. But now some of us gone through a struggle. Has gone through some struggle with finding their place to get back to church and back into that. And so it is hard on the family. Mm-hmm. Pastoring a church is hard on the family, and I don't think it's because these churches are mean and ugly. Yeah. It's just the way things are set up and the things that go with it is really, really hard.
The fishbowl.
Yeah, the fishbowl.
Self-awareness question. What are your greatest weaknesses or things that people might not like about you?
Greatest weaknesses.
Or something that people might not like about you.
Well, there's probably several things. I don't. One thing you come to. I can be pretty stubborn. If I get stubborn, that's it. I'm not going to listen to wise counsel. I'm not going to hardly do anything. And there's a few times that, looking back over even my ministry, that there was some good, wise people in a certain situation was giving me some great, wise counsel. But I had already my mind made up. I dug my heels in, and you wasn't changing my mind. That stubbornness has been to my favor at times, but it's also been times that I know I've disappointed some people and just made some people mad sometimes that, well, you're just being stubborn. You're not wanting to listen now. You got your mind made up, and that's it. And sometimes I do that. I've done that, you know, with that. I'm not always the most organized person when it comes to offices and stuff like that, you know. I'm better at that than I used to be. I think that's a tool that I've had to really grow in and learn over time with that. I don't know. I guess I think I'm sounding pretty arrogant here. I don't have no weaknesses, Aaron.
That's fine. That's good. That's good.
Well, let me say this. I know that some people, that some people would be a negative thing they would say about me. Is he won't stay nowhere any long. I mean, he's not going to stay with you long. You know, I mean, a church could say, well, Scottie Sumner's our pastor. Well, that's good. We like Scottie. He's not going to stay with you long. Mm-hmm. Or, you know, and I have moved around a lot. Now, I'll say, I think that's my calling. I think that's what I'm supposed to have done in my ministry, is I think that's the kind of ministry the Lord has called me to, basically. And I may get before the Lord at the end, he'll say, what were you doing? I'm just going to smack you right now. I don't think he's going to do that, but still, that I'm not the norm when it comes to, you know, just going and staying. I'm known to bounce around a lot. You know, not let the grass grow under your feet type person. And I know a lot of snide remarks made about me, And that's justifiable by people because I've got the resume. The last time I went to the prison at Manchester, the warden called me, and just when she called and asked me to come straighten things out. And she said, but I know you move around a lot. She said, you got to make some kind of a commitment to me. She said, I said, what kind of commitment are you looking for? She said, well, I just need you to commit a decent amount of time. I said, Miss Hogston, I said, Warden Hogston, I said, I can commit 2 years. That's all I could promise. I said, I promise you, I'll do everything to stay 2 years. I said, but after that amount, I said, I may stay the rest of my life there. I said, but I've got a resume. I said, you know my resume, and it is what it is. 2 years may do me in. She said, well, if you give me 2 years, I'll take you. And I was there 2 years. But then I transferred to Lexington. So I do move around a lot, and with some people, they don't get that. And with some people, it's bothered them when I have left them. You know, they felt like, well, you've left us now. We had a good thing going. Why'd you leave?
Yeah. Well, let me say this and I want to ask you why you think that is. But let me say this about that. What I find interesting about you, this is why you're very unique, is because you're back at a church you pastored 30 years ago. And you basically, a lot of your churches are in this area that you've pastored, but you're still thought very highly of. So I don't think you've burnt bridges by any means.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? You're still very, you have you're held in high esteem.
I appreciate that. And I have gone back and preached in every church that I've been at. The Forest Hills Church in Pike County, I've pastored that church 3 different times. Short times, 2 years apiece or so. But I have gone over there 3 different times and been their pastor. So I have gone back to a lot. And I've tried not to burn bridges. I've never left the church because of things going bad. I never had, there's not been one time. As a matter of fact, when I left Horse Creek here in 2000, it was as rich and as big and as strong as while I'd been here as it ever been, you know. And there was no rhyme or reason for people to be able to look at it and say, well, it's good you got out of there, man. That was going south. I've never been in a ministry that's gone south. It might now, but up to this date, it hasn't. It's really, the Lord's blessed me, and so when I left, it was a shock. And even a more shock than I thought it would be, but it was. And it's been like that with other places somewhat, but, you know, I have tried to keep, I've left on good terms and tried to keep good terms with people.
You know, the interesting thing about Horse Creek 30 years ago, and a lot of people that weren't here don't know, what you're saying is exactly true because I was here. Me and my family were here. At that time, I mean, this church was booming. You had 4 young men who surrendered to the ministry under your ministry here. Was there more than 4?
Well, there was you and Boo and Tim Rogers, Joel Pinson.
I didn't remember Joel. And
Glenn Roberts.
Yeah, you had 6 because you had Sean Balance.
Yeah.
6 men under you who had surrendered to the ministry. So it was.
And let me just say, when I look over my ministry and people ask me, what are the things you look back that makes you smile the most? It's what you just said. Out of everything, what you just said right there, the men that have been called to ministry with me, under me. I hate to say under me. It sounds like I'm over somebody. But, and I've been asked that several times. That's the first thing I say is that right there is what I look back on that means the most to me in ministry.
Well, you've affected a lot. God used you. I'll say that. You haven't done it. God used you as a tool in those men's lives. So, because I'm one of them. Do you believe that the modern Baptist church structure is the most biblical, or is it as biblical as it could be, the modern structure of the Baptist church? Well, first of all, the offices that are held, the roles of those offices, and the way they do conduct business.
Okay. I don't know that I've ever been in a Baptist church. That's just me personally. Now, I've never had a bad deacon as far as bad people, bad men and stuff like that. But the role of deacons, but the role of deacons for me is not totally well defined as far as this is just, I think the foundation of it is there with Scripture. But I've never been in a Baptist church where I felt the deacons actually had a very dynamic role and was doing a very dynamic role. It's not just on them, it's just the way we've structured it and the way they are. You know, it's all over the spectrum of what deacons do, and I don't know that some of it is even what they were really intended to do or anything.
So, speaking of that,
okay,
an office of a deacon. The typical traditional Baptist role of a deacon is basically a board of directors. Now, I guess my question is, and again, I'm like you, I have not met a horrible deacon. I just don't know that they're fulfilling the biblical role that they're intended to. I think we've perverted that in our churches. As far as a deacon being the CEO or the board of directors, do you feel that that's where it should be, or maybe something the church ought to look at biblically?
When I have a deacons meeting, there's 3 questions I basically ask them. And if I get this out of them, and for the churches I've been in, I'm pretty much happy with the deacons. You're doing your job right there. One is there anybody in church you know about that's going through a difficult time, that needs some extra attention, that needs somebody that's just in whatever ways, financially, physically, because people can fall between the cracks, nobody even knows it. So is there anybody? And so I encourage the deacons, talk to the Sunday school teachers, ask them about your class, anybody in class struggling that you know. I want you all to be finding, I want you to be looking, I want you to be listening, I want you to be asking questions, I want you to be finding out, I want you to be hearing. Is there anything going on with anybody that needs some extra attention? Is somebody hurting, struggling? Second question, is there any trouble brewing in the church you know about? Is there any fires being started that we need to start addressing, that we need to get in, that we need to start praying about, we need to start taking care of? Is there anything brewing that in the church that we need to deal with? And
hopefully it's not the deacon.
Right, right. And the third question is me. Is there anything about me? Are you hearing anything in the community negative toward me, about your preacher, about your preacher's wife, is there anything in any way, you're hearing people within the church that's maybe disappointed with Scottie about something? Is this about, I want you to help hold me accountable. I don't want to be a preacher that there's whispering going on everywhere, and I don't even know the whispering's going on. And you're letting me come in here not knowing nothing. I'm depending on you all to have the boldness and the courage to talk to me straight about any kind of negativity you hear about me. And so that we can make that, because if the preachers get taught bad about negative, it's hurting the whole church. So that's the 3 things. And to me, if my deacons do that, then we're going a long way into keeping the church healthy. Now, what I try to do with the other kind of leadership within the church is leaders over every ministry. And you take the Sunday school director, your children's minister, your secretary clerk, your chairman of the deacons, your bus captain, bus minister, your senior citizen, your shut-in director. You get a leader over every aspect of your church. And I have a monthly meeting with them. And what I tell the deacons is that we're overlooking the whole church, and these specific things here I'm talking about right here to keep the church healthy as far as with unity and things like that. Then I meet with this other team that's specific about your ministries and what we can do to keep everybody in unity as leaders. If you leaders stay in unity, then our church is going to be in unity. So we have a monthly meeting there, and it's a meeting where it might be a Saturday morning with coffee and donuts, and it's laid back. It might be at my house where we're sitting around the living room, not in a stiff block building just doing a cold meeting, but we're laughing and cutting up and maybe telling jokes, and then we get into talking about what we're doing in ministry and what's Sunday school doing, what's Wednesday Night Awanas doing, how's things going with the children or the buses, and so you have those. So that's sort of, I got 2 sets of leaders. the deacons, and this is what we do as deacons, and I've told you all are ordained men of God. There's people laid hands on you that see in you your role as in church leadership and church oversight. And and God sees that in you, and that's your position here, and that's what we're doing. This other team is more the specific things going on in church and keeping the church together in unity with what we're doing as a church.
Okay. And you can only answer this numerically.
Okay.
Okay. I only want a number.
Okay.
But what do you, in your opinion, what is the lowest number of people on a regular basis that constitutes a church? If you had to pick a number and say, this is the number that I believe constitutes a church, what would that number be?
So you're talking about a local church? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, this may be an answer I'll give, and then when I go home, think about it and pray about it a little bit, think, wait, but Aaron, edit that out. I'm going to give you another answer here. I would say 2. You start with 2 and start growing from 2.
2 or 3 are gathered. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, with that answered, mm-hmm. how many is too many for one pastor to give an account before the Lord? At what point, mm-hmm. at what number do you think, hey, you know what, this is outgrown with one pastor here, mm-hmm. you know, we need other pastors mm-hmm. to assist.
Yeah.
What's that number?
200.
200.
I'm talking about if you got a church membership of 200, you're actually pastoring more than that, you know, because you got community people that's going to use your church, or use you as a pastor, whatever. And I'm saying that partially because I was taught that in school. Mm-hmm. And I remember at Clear Creek, in a conference we had, and the person, I forget which one it was, that came and did that workshop that week or whatever it was for a few days. And he talked about when you get around 200, then you've got that awkward stage. One pastor can pretty much take care up to a church up to 200 membership, and that's pressing it, mm-hmm. 200. That's really pressing it. But you still got to have the structure of where your Sunday school teachers, maybe like under shepherds that are watching over their classes and doing stuff like that on just a volunteer basis and this. But if you start getting over 200, then it starts getting to, you got to start bringing other professional type of ministers on then. And that's what I was thinking when I was at Horse Creek the last time. Horse Creek had never really had an associate pastor before. Mm-hmm. And I knew when I came here, we was running about 175 in Sunday school, we were about 150 in worship. But then we went up to about double that and almost triple that probably in worship before the time I left. And so that's the reason, and I started talking with the deacons and the church that I need some more help here and I brought Glenn Roberts on then as my associate pastor. And so Glenn was my go-to person then. Of course, we had a paid secretary and things like that, but that was the only associate that we brought on. Churches could have more even paid leadership than they realize they can have. Mm-hmm. You know, W.A. Crystal said, every true leader is going to pay for himself.
So speaking of pay,
uh-huh.
So again, numerically,
mm-hmm.
only answer numerically.
Okay.
What is the smallest amount, in your opinion, that a church should weekly pay a pastor?
Today. Okay, I'd say, of course, you get into a lot of this now. I'm going to give you a number.
Okay.
Of course, like a church may have a $61,000 salary. Well, but you're paying insurance out of that, blah, blah. You know, if you're working for somebody and you're getting paid a salary, let's say your salary's $61,000, but you get insurance on top of that, you get other stuff. So as far as, I would say, now ask me that question again.
What is the smallest amount that a church, do you think, is obligated, spiritually obligated, to pay their pastor?
I'd say today in Clay County, $1,000 a week.
$1,000 a week.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What's the largest?
You know, I really can't. I mean, I can't hardly answer that. I mean, I may hear just give me a second. At
what point do you think, you know what, that's maybe too much?
$1,500 a week.
Fair enough. You gave me a number.
I do think that if you're expecting someone to be full-time and that's their vocation, to take care of a body, that they should be compensated to take care of their family and not have to be worrying about money with that, and let them take care of their family. Yeah. And I've noticed this is my experience. I'm not saying it's the rule of thumb even, it's my experience. When I've served in churches, for the most part, they want to definitely just give you the least amount they can, and that's what it's always going to be. There's very little extra besides that. But when I've done ministry outside of churches, and I've done some ministry where I've just started ministries from ground up, where you're dependent on just God, you got to provide. God's provided more than when I've served in churches. When I've not had no certain pay or no certain thing came in, but I'm just depending on God to take care of me. Yeah. When I left Horse Creek in 2000, we had no income for 3 months. Patty kept a record the very first month of me not being at Horse Creek Baptist Church. We never asked one person for one dime, not one person. At the end of that first month, we had been given more money than if I'd been pastoring Horse Creek Baptist Church. And I've noticed when it's been like that, people's just always, and it's just the Lord's always sent it. But when you're depending on a church, you just get what that church decides to give.
Yeah. Wow. So, I know we've been at this a long time. Bear with me.
Oh, I'm fine. I'm good. I don't want to worry you
Real quick
out.
question on church discipline. Well, first of all, do you believe in church discipline? And then, if you do, when's the last time that you had to practice or participate in a congregational church discipline?
Off the top of my head, I can't never think of a time. I think that's one of the difficulties of the church structure we have. I think church discipline, the only way, the way for it to be done would be through small groups or cell groups.
Yeah. Well, let me rephrase the question then. Have you ever, maybe not in a church setting, but have you ever personally had to practice a form of church discipline one-on-one with somebody?
I guess it's technically what you mean by church discipline, but I have had to have some tough conversations and corrections with people, and it would be the very first church. Yeah. There was some gossip taking place a little bit. One of the deacon came and told me that on a particular night there was a group gathered, and there was this one specific lady saying some derogatory things. And I didn't have enough sense but to think, well, I need to go talk to her. And I said, you're the one who told me you need to go with me. And we went to her house. And we sat down, and I told her while we was there and he's heard what you said, and we've just come to, to make this right. She threw the Bible at me and run out the door. And she shared it with the church the next time we met at church. And she didn't appreciate me doing that. That lady became one of my best friends. When I left that church, anywhere I was ever preaching from, she passed away a few years ago. But anywhere if she was ever within driving distance of hearing me preach somewhere, up until she passed away just a few years ago, she would come and hear me preach and hug my neck. And she's the only person really in ministry from going back and that's a long time ago, 30 years ago or more, that would come and hear me regardless.
Well, Scripture says, if you have a brother in sin, you go to them one-on-one. And if they don't listen, take 2 more with you. And if they don't listen, then take it for the church. You did it biblically, in my opinion. Okay. So as far as, and let me clarify this. There are some that are out there, even amongst our circles, that say that the first 11 chapters of Genesis are figurative. They're not literal. Didn't take place. How do you feel about the first 11 chapters of Genesis?
I just, Go all the way back to growing up in Sunday school at Big Creek Baptist Church. I take it as being literal. Now, if that's about as far as people go and they're not taking it much farther than that, I disagree with them. But it don't ruffle my feathers as much as it probably should, maybe, as it does a lot of people. I disagree. I mean, I'll debate them and disagree over it on all of that. But I'm not going to say you can't be a Christian or anything like that. But I just believe it. I just believe that's the Bible. And that's.
So you believe the first 11 chapters are true?
Yeah.
And real?
Yeah.
And what it says, it says?
I believe there's 7 days.
You believe that when God said on day one, it was day one?
Yep.
24-hour period?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, I do.
And I know a famous evangelist said this, which was very disappointing, but we'll leave him out of this.
Yeah.
Do you think there's multiple ways to heaven, or what?
There is one way to heaven only, and that is through Jesus Christ. That is through his death, burial, and resurrection, and our turning from sin and turning to him and being born again by the Spirit of God.
So you mean to tell me that I can't be just a good person?
Right.
What if I donate to orphans homes and battered women's homes, and I volunteer my time? You mean that doesn't?
That's a good thing to do, but it's not going to get you to heaven. It's not going to get you right with God, because you have sinned. And that sin is still wide open before God.
So you think there's only one way?
There's only one way.
And his name is Jesus.
Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one goeth to the Father but by me.
Amen.
Yeah.
Well, good one for what we just experienced. You know, there's people questioning right now from the assassination of Charlie Kirk, who was a devout Christian.
Right.
I know there's lots of rumors out there about him.
Yeah.
Lies. But from my view, I've seen him be I would call him a brother, most certainly.
Oh, yeah.
And I think he lived a devout life dedicated to the mission of telling people the good news of the gospel.
Right.
But with that, a lot of people are asking, if God is truly sovereign, how in the world can he let bad things happen like that? What would you say to somebody that questioning the sovereignty of God in an instance like the assassination of Charlie Kirk, a good man?
Well, my answer to that, as far as with that, and it's pretty simplistic and naive. One thing is, I don't fully understand God's ways are above my ways, and I know that's a cop-out answer. No, that's true. That's Bible, and that's true.
Fact. And
God is working this world for eternity, not just for now. And God is even using bad, gosh-awful things for eternity. And it's not just, you and I, everything, what we see is the now. And why the now? Why this? When behind the scenes, God has a plan with this, and who knows how much is going to be done for eternity with this awful thing that took place that was ungodly, that was wrong, that was full of sin, that was full of vileness, but yet in the sovereignty of God that I cannot fully understand, he is using that for eternity. And I mean, and personally, I think we always see some of it. I've already seen records of many people testifying they've gone to church first time in their life because of what happened to Charlie Kirk. There's people right now that are seeking the Lord from their own testimony who wouldn't even try to seek the Lord, but now that has happened, that shook them to the core. So I don't know all the ways that God's using this, but I know this, God is using it, and God's behind it, do everything for eternity.
Ooh, love it. Thank you. What is your view of soteriology, the doctrine of salvation?
Yeah.
So what is your view on soteriology?
Yeah, I heard somebody say one time that about John 3:16. It's so simple a child can understand it, but yet it's so deep the greatest of theologians can't reach the depths of it all. You know, Adam and Eve, sinned in the garden. And that sin has been passed on to the whole human race, to all mankind. So we've all sinned. Where we've sinned, that's our nature. We don't even be taught to sin. We may be taught to do it better or to do it worse, which way you want to look at that, you know. But we've all sinned, and that sin separates us from God. And there's no way that we can get rid of that sin. It's there. We're guilty. We deserve the punishment, the sentence that brings, which is death, eternal separation. But because of God's love, His grace, His mercy, He sent His Son to take that sentence upon Himself, to take the punishment that was supposed to come to us because of our sin, for Him to take that punishment. And He did that. He lived that perfect life. Jesus lived a perfect life. He was born of a virgin. He didn't have the sin nature because He was born from above by the Holy Spirit, a miracle of the Holy Spirit that came upon Mary. And so He lived, tempted in every way we are, but yet without sin. He was the Lamb without spot or blemish. And God has shown us pictures of all of this all through the Old Testament with the sacrificial system. Even Adam and Eve in the garden with the death of the animal and having to give its blood and its skin to cover them, you know, that they couldn't cover themselves. And so we're separated from God. And so Jesus came to pay that price. And so it's a work of God through the Holy Spirit that reaches down and convicts us and draws us to the atoning work, the redemption work, the work that Jesus did covering our sins, and draws us unto Himself. And by grace, through faith, we are saved. It's not of any work we can do. We can't boast about, hey, I'm saved. I hear people say a lot of times, I'm proud to be a Christian. I'm proud of my salvation. That, I understand that may not be such a bad thing to say, but in a way, but for me, that's saying, look what I've done. I got myself saved. I know that's not what they're saying, really. But only God saves us, and it's Him reaching down to us and calling us and drawing us, showing us who Jesus really is. And it's the work of the Holy Spirit that transforms us inwardly, whereby His Spirit comes in then to abide in us.
So can the assassin of Charlie Kirk be saved?
He certainly can. That's up to God.
What you're telling me is if God looked down the corridors of time and He saw Aaron Mobley, He didn't say, you know what, Aaron's a great guy. He saw a scumbag who needed saved.
Right. Yep. Exactly.
Amen.
Exactly.
What are some of your hobbies? Outside of ministry, we've talked a lot about ministry, pastoring, chaplaincy. Tell me what you do for fun.
Yeah. I love riding a motorcycle. This is the first summer in 25 years I haven't had a motorcycle. I sold mine last year at the end of the riding season. I've got them saved all over my phone. I just haven't bought one yet, but I do, and I miss a motorcycle. I think they're a beautiful machine. I love to just get out and ride by myself. That's wind therapy. That saves a lot of counselor money. And so I love motorcycle riding, and I'll get me another motorcycle probably, if Lord willing. So I'll get me another one here at the end of this year, get it cheaper and that. I love woodworking. I've got a woodwork shop, and I love going out, and I make quite a bit of furniture. Some of the furniture in our home, I've made it. Beds and chairs and kitchen tables, and I've made enough bird houses to house every bird in Kentucky, I believe, for my wife. So I love woodwork. I'm a Kentucky basketball fan. I bleed blue.
Funniest moment in ministry, and you don't have to mention names. What's one of the funniest moments in ministry?
I don't know. I have to think of that just a second here now. Funniest moments.
I remember Dean.
Tell this one right quick here, and it's just because it's so recent. I baptized a little boy right here in Horse Creek two Sundays ago. He was 8 years old. And we filled the baptistry up on Saturday night, turned the heat on, but the heat must have kicked off. And that Sunday morning, just 2 weeks ago, you can look it up on Facebook, it's on there. And the water was bitterly cold. Bitterly cold. I didn't know I thought his parole was probably okay. When I stepped in, I had waders on and a robe. And so I didn't feel it being cold. But as I was sharing a little bit before he stepped down, I was sharing about Matthew 28, 18 through 20, and why we baptize, what baptism represents. And then I noticed this water seems to be pretty cold. I got these hip waders on. He stepped into the water. He started screaming. And started, are you kidding me? At first I thought he said something bad. I put my hand over his mouth. I thought he was saying a bad word to everybody, But he didn't say a bad word. But at first I thought he was going to embarrass everybody. But he just went on and on at first. Everybody's just dying laughing. And then he finally calmed down. And I didn't go through near as much as I normally do, baptizing somebody because he was frozen to death. I put him in and brought him out, and done that. So that ain't no big deal. But that was pretty funny. And I told the congregation, there's people, I baptized a lot of people in 42 years of ministry. And some people I don't remember. I bumped into a lady just 2 or 3 weeks ago, and she said, you remember baptizing me? I didn't remember baptizing her. And I've had that happen several times. You baptize a lot, and I don't keep records. I used to keep records, but I lost them all and just quit then. And I told the congregation, I don't remember a lot of baptisms. I'll remember this one.
Tell me your top 3 regrets.
I regret not homeschooling my girls. If I had to do all, we had great teachers, and this is not even a dart at public schools. But I just believe, biblically and what we would have liked to have done and seen, and I wish I'd have homeschooled our daughters. Well, that's one regret. I regret, I told about Patty and me getting married, and Clint, my best man. I said little wedding. We didn't have a wedding. Patty and I went to a preacher's house, and the preacher's niece, it was Patty's best friend, that was her best friend's uncle. And we went to his house and just got married, went home. Patty made spaghetti. I went back to work Monday morning. Patty's always, and it's always hurt her that we never had a wedding of some kind. No picture, no mention of nothing. We just went and did that, and that may sound silly or something, but that's always bothered her that we never had a wedding, and it bothers me because at that time we don't know wedding. I mean, I got to go to work anyway. I can't take off work. That's how silly I was back then, and so I regret that. I regret that I've not told the story of this, but we ran a rescue mission for 10 years, and that was Patty's baby, really. I was a chaplain and a janitor, basically was my job at that mission we did in Laurel County, and it was very successful. I mean, that was a great ministry for both of us. And we saw God move in many ways, and especially drug addicts' lives, and we learned a lot. I mean, we learned a lot through that. And that was one of those times I got stubborn. I think the Lord was leading us. I'm a seasonal guy. That's one reason I've moved around a lot. I think the Lord's put me in seasons and led me to another season. But we did that for 10 years. But I think the season was coming to an end. But then we had a group of ladies that we'd always had the best time. We took women and men through recovery. They lived with us. We took them through recovery. And I got burnt out on it. And when I got burnt out, this church in Eastern Kentucky called. And they were in trouble and wanted me to come and help. And I said, Patty, I'm done with this. It's time for us to move. I got to get back to the church. I'm wore out with this. Patty wasn't wore out. She was ready to keep on going. Or at least our board of directors met with them. Oh, Scottie, take a sabbatical. Take some time off. That church was calling. I saw a way out. I knew when I left that's the only time I ever made a move that I knew when I was making it. I just made it because I wanted out and I wanted gone. I wanted something else. And that was probably one of the richest ministries we've ever done, was that rescue mission. But I got tired and weary. Patty was pleading with me, Scottie, just take a break. Let's not do nothing. Don't. But the board directors, that's when those wise people, we had great board directors. They was pleading with me, Scottie, just hang on. No, I'm done now. I know what I need to do. Y'all know your feet's not my shoes. I dug in against Patty. I dug in against my board of directors, and we left the mission. I went and pastored a church. I was miserable. It took me probably 3 years before I was able to forgive myself and and move on. I took that from Patty. I took that from the board of directors, out of my stubbornness, and nobody's going to talk me out of it. And maybe we should have left that mission anyway, but not the way I left it, being just upset and stubborn, and this church is called and I'm going. And so I regret, I think that's the most damage, the most hurt I've ever done to my wife, and it was a hurt. Now she stuck with me, she still loved me, and she don't hold that against me today, but I was wrong. And I've talked to people about that, and I remember one preacher telling me, I don't know why you feel so bad about it. I mean, you went to pastor a church. Why do you? Listen, I don't care if I was pastoring a church. I was out of God's will. I did that out of being stubborn and just to run. So I regret that.
Okay. Last question. How do you want to be remembered when you die?
I guess, that could probably be said a lot of different ways, this, that, or other, but this may be too easy, too cheap. I guess I'd like to be remembered as a man that just loved and followed the Lord. And that's really what I've tried to do. The greatest commandment is love the Lord our God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength. What's the second is likened to love your neighbor as yourself. But I've loved him and that I have followed him. I didn't just say, okay, I'm doing this, but wherever he led, I followed. And I guess that's one reason I'm hurt so much when I left that mission like I did, because I wasn't following him then. I went and did my thing, even though I went to a church to pastor. But if I could just be remembered, as Scottie, I'll say this about him. He loved the Lord and he followed the Lord. That's what I've really probably tried to do, and that's probably what I'd like to leave behind.
Okay. Scottie, thank you, brother.
Thank you. I've enjoyed this.